The Trojans are 5-0. Does that mean it's time to panic?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching this show on YouTube or wherever you're going to download your podcast, this show is free. I appreciate your support. You can show your appreciation. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, become a subscriber. It's so easy. You just have to click the subscribe button. When you see that thumbs up button, hit it. And so you never miss one episode of Locked On USC, click that bell notification button, and you have covered all of your bases. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back guaranteed. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. Hey, it's true. USC won on the road, and things aren't going quite as anticipated. For the second week in a row, USC went on the road, and they won. They won their game, and they still fell in the national polls. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the third segment of the show, as you can see the rundown today. We're going to talk about USC's 5-0 record. Is it time to panic? Get into the team's weekly development in the second segment, and then we're going to take a peek at the AP poll and where USC is in that third segment. Like I said, USC, they're 5-0. There's a little bit of concern starting to creep in about the last 7 regular season games. Some talk about, these games could be wasted on Caleb if the defense doesn't start supporting the team more. And this is what happens when wins don't feel like wins. And that's a result of the expectation level has been raised. Right now, it's championship or bust at USC, and that's the way it should always be. But there's a feeling right now that it's not leaning towards championship. It's kind of leaning back towards the bust after at least the last 2 performances, albeit they were on the road. They weren't positive feelings when the game was over. And what's happening is after each game, it's starting to become a little bit more commonplace for Lincoln Riley to start sounding a little bit like his predecessor. Well, he'll, in his opening comments, he'll after the game, he'll say, we did this good, and we did this well, and we did this great. But when we don't do blank, 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 we have a lot of work to do. This is what Coach Riley said after the game Saturday. USC played its best half of football of the season over the first 30 minutes at Folsom Field. Almost a full 30 minutes. I get it. When you're leading 34-14 at halftime, those final 3 minutes, they might get lost in the weeds, so to speak. You'll lump it in with the first half. But in those final 3 minutes, you have to be able to admit that the team either had a mental letdown or it was just poor, fundamentally sound football. I'm not going to split that hair. In fact, instead, I'm just going to say yes, both transpired. And let me back that up with this little appetizer for you to kind of nibble on a little bit here. When it comes to fundamentals on the defensive side of the ball, Colorado, they gained 209 of its 371 receiving yards after they made the catch against USC's defense. That means a lot of yards after contact or no contact at all. Coach Riley continued, that drive right before half gave them life. We were doing everything really well, but Shedeur Sanders, gets outside of the pocket and makes a few plays. When you give a quarterback confidence, there's nothing like being able to throw a 7-yard hitch route up there. And there's a couple of those that went 30, 40 plus yards. One went longer than that. So you've got to own those things. We've got to be better at them, and those are the plays that we didn't make. Now, that's what I remembered of the first, when the first half ended. And when the second half started, I was a little bit concerned because I remember how the previous game on the road ended, starting with the second half. But my concerns were, at least, initially they were squashed because the defense came out of the locker room and they got 2 consecutive 3-and-outs. And then right after that, or at least shortly thereafter, the score was USC 41, Colorado 14. So what happened after that? 41-14, about 6 minutes left in the third quarter. Who turned off the power? I mean, did the team just let up? I know everybody likes to pick on the defense because they're an easy target. However, what happened to the offense? Why did they stop scoring? Did Lincoln Riley try and shift gears, but they weren't capable of doing it? I mean, does Lincoln Riley's offense actually hurt the defense because they need to play at a up tempo and that, they score quickly? A lot of their drives are 4, 5, 6 plays at the most. So if the defense is being sent out onto the field too quickly, is that going to affect their play down the stretch? I know playing at altitude, that can play a role. But again, if the defense is being put back on the field too frequently, too often, too quickly, it doesn't take the trained eye to know that if USC would have run the ball with that large lead more effectively, that might have assisted the defense. It certainly could have helped, not have them miss 18 tackles that they were credited for in that game. And one of those missed 18 tackles, that happened when that Trojan cornerback was left out on an island with no safety help on one of those quick hitch patterns that Lincoln Riley was talking about. Because once that tackle was broken, it set Colorado up. They scored a few plays later. And then all of a sudden, when the Buffs cut the score down to 41-21, that's kind of when everybody on the USC sideline and the Trojan fan base, it was kind of like, all right, let's hang on and hope that the defense can make a play, at least until the offense found its rhythm again. Lincoln Riley, he finished off his post-game press conference with, we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to own the win. We're going to own the mistakes. We're going to own the good. We're going to go back to work and get ready to get back home in the Coliseum. Well, here's another litmus test for USC. I kind of made this my trap game earlier during the preseason. They're coming home to play Arizona. Everyone anticipated USC being undefeated at this point. But the week after Arizona, USC travels to South Bend for that game against Notre Dame. Lincoln Riley said this: we're a team that gets circled every single week. And to come win these games on the road, he's referring to USC going on the road and finding a way to win. That's great. But because I promise you, at the end of the year, nobody's going to look back at this and care. They're going to look back and see it was a dub. And hopefully we can keep stacking those up. He's referring to wins. Now, as long as USC continues to win and the teams that are currently ahead of USC in the polls lose here and there, nobody will care. However, right now, the people who are voting, they do care because they're sending a message to USC by dropping them in the polls. Now, it's not time to panic, but it is time to find out if this team can handle playing from behind, because that's going to happen eventually and probably sooner rather than later if things don't change on offense and on defense. On tomorrow's episode, I'm going to come back and I'm going to give grades for each position group. I'm kind of still in the process of grading the papers. And I might even have an update on who Lincoln Riley threw the bat signal up for on Sunday night. There's some recruiting news. And if you've been paying attention to the show, I know my everyday listeners and viewers have, I'll give you guys a hint. It's a defensive player. It's now time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Trojans Heisman-winning quarterback Caleb Williams, he is changing the way the position is being played. The same way Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. His name is Caleb Williams, the guy who makes the impossible possible. And against Colorado in a battle for the Heisman frontrunner spot versus Shedeur Sanders, Caleb Williams threw for 6 touchdowns and over 400 yards. And he did it with ease. And because Athletic Brewing's brews are non-alcoholic, you can enjoy more of them before, during, or after the game. Athletic Brewing makes non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy them online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers, you can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. The college football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. Locked On College Football Live will cover the college football playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and they're going to go in-depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College Football channel. You won't want to miss it. All right. We can harp on the defense and all the things our untrained eyes see that need to be improved on, whether it's the defense's tackling or the offense is consistently running the ball. When the Trojans don't play a full 60 minutes of football, it not only affects the immediate future, the game itself, it actually also affects the bigger picture and the team's development. When you're leading the game 41-14, 6 minutes roughly to go in the third quarter, this is the point of the game when your backups, you're going to see them on the sideline. They're starting to get stretched out a little bit more. They're making sure that the chin strap on the helmet is snapped on. They're making sure the helmet fits just right, adjusting the shoulder pads, making sure the coaches see them. And they're doing this because they're anticipating playing and earning some valuable game experience that can actually help not only themselves, but the team in the future. Now, whether it's this season or next season, weekly development needs to happen. It's not happening right now. And in either case against Arizona State or Colorado, USC missed 2 golden opportunities. And it kind of just goes to show you how one little thing can have a trickle-down effect and affect the entire nervous system. We know that injuries in football happen. And when that does, when an injury pops up, the next man up is anticipated to fill in and just go in and get the job done. Okay. However, making that transition is a lot easier, especially for a young player, when he's had opportunity to play in different types of environments and not just play at home in the comfort in front of the fans. Lincoln Riley's teams missed 2 chances in these last 2 road games because the team's development is still learning how to play a full 60 minutes. They were up big, both at Arizona State and against Colorado on the road. This would have been a good game for one of the backup centers. Let's just use Colorado right now. This would have been a perfect game for one of the backup centers to get some valuable experience. Especially so Justin Diedick could have gotten some valuable rest and hydration after being hooked up to an IV multiple times between Friday and game time Saturday. He was dealing with a stomach flu. So you want to give credit, to the captain for quote unquote gutting through it. But doesn't that also kind of say that the staff doesn't trust the backup unless they're forced to use one? I'm positive Miller Moss was looking forward to getting some game time experience playing on the road. The defensive line and the rush end positions, they've developed. I think that's the two position groups that you could look on game in and game out and say, you know what? They're developing weekly. So credit to Sean Nua as well as Roy Manning for getting those two groups ready to go each week. Braylon Shelby, freshman, he saw action throughout the game as well as in the second half. That's a good sign. And another positive sign, veteran Dejon Benton, he's found his way into the rotation. Talked about that a little bit on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC. But overall, in the bigger picture, it's not showing up on a weekly basis with the team looking like it's getting better week to week. They're struggling to close out games, at least on the road. And especially when we're considering that this has been the easiest part of the schedule. When the team motto is the longer goes, the better we get, the team's actions have to start backing up those words. The 5-0 record, it doesn't tell the whole story. Because the longer each game goes, the other team is getting better. And if this happens again in their next game at home, when Arizona's Wildcats show up, it could be a sign that this is going to be a long season going forward and not the kind of season where they're getting better. As far as the offense is concerned, they've got to find that killer instinct when they're up big. That starts with the head coach and your play caller, Lincoln Riley. Josh Henson is the offensive coordinator in name. We know who's calling the plays. The offensive line, they need to be ready by the time they get to South Bend. The secondary, they need to show more improvement, significant improvement. The linebackers, they're showing improvement and then they're showing the same issues from last year. That needs to get rectified before they get to South Bend. I think everybody just wants to see a sense of urgency, and they want to see that developed. But it should kind of already be there because we're at the halfway point of the season right now. And without that sense of urgency and showing development weekly, you might see USC continue to drop in the polls like they have for the last 2 weeks. We're going to talk about it in the next segment. I need you to snap into action because the NFL season is here and FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's simple. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is literally no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is so easy to use, and there is a wide range of betting options, including you can bet on the point spread. You can make player prop bets. How many touchdowns will Caleb Williams throw next week against Arizona? You can bet the over-under, and there's a whole lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Coincidence? Yes or no? Out of the top 25 teams, how come USC is the only one that's punished for winning games? And on the road, nonetheless? The new polls came out, and for the second week in a row, despite winning on the road, USC fell in the AP poll. 2 weeks ago, I was subtle. I tried to be subtle. However, I'm not sure Coach Riley really understands the mountain of respect that USC and the Pac-12 has to climb. I asked him about sending a message when you're playing a team you're expected to beat by a lot of points. Coach Riley didn't think that it was really important and that everything eventually will work itself out. And in the end, as long as the Trojans are undefeated, it will work itself out. I promise everybody, if USC is 12-0, well, if USC is 12-0 when they get to the conference championship game, depending on who they play, they're probably going to find themselves in the playoffs. But that doesn't go to the point that USC does not look good when they're winning. And when that happens, they drop in the polls where other teams can win and they move up. Coach, let me be your Sherpa. I'll guide you on how to climb that mountain of respect and help USC standing in the national spotlight. I'm not going to tell you how to coach. That's on you. However, USC has to look good when they're winning. They have to put the foot on the back of the neck against teams like Colorado and Arizona State. Because when you're USC, winning isn't just enough. Style points count. And when you don't have enough style points, they will actually work against you when you're not showing improvement on a weekly basis. Winning on the road is difficult. Everybody knows that. Again, though, when you're considered a championship caliber team, 41 to 14 games should not end up ending 48 to 41. That's not the message you want to send. And this is why the Trojans are ranked number 9 in the country in the latest AP poll. One spot now behind Oregon, who moved up. Remember, 2 weeks ago, the Trojans were the number 5 team in the country. The Trojans right now sit at the number 9 team in the nation, and they're the number 3 team in the Pac-12 as far as the AP poll is concerned. Here's your new top 25. Georgia's number 1. They struggled with Auburn. Michigan hasn't given up double-digit points yet. They stayed at number 2. I think they might be the number 1 ranked team in the country right now. I get it. They haven't played a great schedule, but they look the part. They look like they're getting better each week. Texas has their Red River shootout coming up with Oklahoma. We'll see if they're going to hold on to that number 3 spot. Ohio State, they're holding steady at 4. Florida State, they had a bye week. They're going to stay at number 5. Penn State, they do what they do. Washington, Oregon, then USC, and then number 10, Notre Dame. So Washington at number 7, Oregon 8, then USC. The AP voters think USC is the 3rd best team in the conference. How's that feel, Trojan fans? Do you agree? I wonder how Lincoln Riley feels. Does he agree? The remaining top 25. Number 11, Alabama. Oklahoma at 12. Washington State, 13. North Carolina, 14. Oregon State at 15. Then you've got Ole Miss, Miami, Utah, Duke, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU. They're 3-2, by the way, but their losses came against Ole Miss and Florida State. Fresno State checks in at 24. Louisville at 25. Now, Lincoln Riley is absolutely correct in one regard. It's not how you start, but where you finish. Absolutely, 100% on target. But let me point this out. Oregon led Stanford 14-6 at halftime. Penn State was actually tied with Northwestern 10-10. That was on the road in Evanston, Illinois. Both of those teams wound up winning after dominating in the second half. See the difference between USC and those two teams? Those two teams are ahead of USC right now. Maybe that's the message Lincoln Riley should be sending to his team on a per-game basis and not just big picture. Look, USC has only looked dominant in 2 of their first 5 games, Nevada and Stanford. The other 3, they've looked dominant for portions of each game. They need to look dominant at the end of games, just like Penn State did, just like Michigan, just like Oregon did. Because right now, if they don't, they're going to have a hard time sending that message. Other teams are going to know, hey, you know what? We can play with USC. They don't know how to put teams away. With the rest of the schedule coming up, the schedule is going to be more challenging. USC they're going to need to be prepared. And the people in the AP poll, they're watching closely. And before you know it, that playoff committee poll will be voting as well. So USC's schedule sets them up well. I get it. They dropped to number 9. If they start winning these next games, I know Arizona's not ranked, but they are dangerous. They took Washington to the wire. Or, excuse me, that was Cal. Who did Arizona just play? It escapes me. Regardless, they have an offense. They can put up points. I'll be back with another episode of Locked on USC tomorrow. Come at you 5 times a week. Again, I'm going to have some grades, I'm going to have some recruiting information, and a whole lot more. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.